The Nintendo 64 had very few games most folks would consider traditional RPGs, but there were several games along the way that were experimenting with form and including RPG-like mechanics. We're taking a look at those games today and what makes them what I have been calling almost RPGs for the Nintendo 64. I tried to order these in a way intended to keep it fresh and exciting, so let's get started. Let's start with Mystical Ninja starring Goemon. Released in the US in 1998 for the Nintendo 64, Mystical Ninja starring Goemon is one of the most bizarre, charming, and genre-defying things. Developed by Konami, this title is technically an action-adventure game, but it's got a lot of RPG stuff going on in it, like character progression, money collection and item usage, story progression and town exploration, dungeons. It's to the extent that I've heard it referred to as an action RPG. This game is wild, unpredictable, and filled with so much cultural quirk, weirdness, and creativity that, while it can be compared to other games, it's really unlike anything else from its generation, which, funny enough, is much like the entry that we got in the US for the Super Nintendo. The game is part of the Ganbare Goemon series, which has been successful in Japan across several platforms. But Mystical Ninja starring Goemon was one of the first, not the first mind you, in the franchise to get a serious Western release. That localization choice resulted in a strange, slightly surreal experience for players unfamiliar with Japanese culture, but it was also a delightfully absurd one. Maybe it's comparable to the way Earthbound shared Americana with Japanese audiences. You play mostly as Goemon, a blue-haired pipe-swinging adventurer alongside his eccentric friends, Abisumaru, a thick and flamboyant ninja, Yae, a cool-headed and reasonable swordsman, and Sasuke, a spirited tiny robot ninja. Using these characters, players must stop an alien invasion led by an equally flamboyant kabuki-themed villain. The plot is barely coherent or cohesive in terms of traditional narrative, but that's part of the magic. It doesn't take itself seriously, and you know what, neither should you. Just jump in, smile ear to ear, and go with the flow. Gameplay covers several genres. It has Zelda-style exploration, light platforming, beat-em-up combat, and puzzle solving. The perspective shifts between third-person action and side-scrolling depending on the environment. I feel like it's great, but it's not the best in class in any of its genres, but the sheer variety keeps it engaging, and the whole is worth more than the sum of its parts. Each character has their own abilities which are necessary to progress. Abisumaru can shrink, Yae can swim, and Sasuke can throw bombs, and Goemon has multiple pipe attachments used for progression. Hope you're ready for the next episode. Hey. The game constantly encourages switching between party members to solve puzzles and access new areas, and again, this keeps it fresh. One of the coolest parts of Goemon is its boss fights, which can involve giant robot battles set to full-blown musical numbers. Yes, really. This game is basically one part musical theater as well. Like, you pilot a massive mecha named Impact, which is Goemon's alter ego, I suppose, and these sequences play out like something out of a tokusatsu show, complete with animated cutscenes, singing, and first-person missile-firing madness. It's gloriously over the top, and it's emblematic of the game's energy. Visually, the game embraces its roots in Japanese folklore and pop culture. The world is colorful, it's weird, and filled with cherry blossoms, tanuki statues, giant peaches, and haunted castles. The environments are simple by today's standards, but they pop with personality and texture. I would argue that any jankiness you find in this game is soon just swept away by the sheer creativity and awesomeness of it. The soundtrack is phenomenal. It's a mix of traditional Japanese instruments with upbeat, energetic tunes that shift in tone as quickly as the game does itself. From funky battle music to serene village themes, the audio design is top tier, and I found myself humming the music even as I sat to write this script. If there's a flaw, it's in the game's camera, and occasionally frustrating controls, but this is absolutely me being nitpicky. The camera is honestly really solid in comparison to other early 3D video games, and the controls only become frustrating as the camera figures itself out. As with many early 3D titles, the camera can feel bad, especially in tight spaces or precise jumps. Still, these faults are easy to forgive in light of the game's overwhelming consistency regarding fun and quirk. Mystical Ninja starring Goemon isn't just a cult classic. It's a chaotic celebration of Japanese culture filtered through pure weirdness. Now, it's not a perfect game, but it's honestly one of the best on the system and one of the most memorable adventures you can have on the Nintendo 64. If you like your games colorful, comedic, and just a little bit crazy, this is certainly one you should consider. Oh, do you hear that? That's the lack of robocallers. That's amazing. Usually I get interrupted making my videos because there's so many, like, there's robocallers or whatever. If you've ever wondered how, like, these people get a hold of your numbers, that's because data brokers are selling your data to people and making so much money off of it. They give it to marketers, they give it to scammers, and even stalkers. Now, to be fair, they're legally required to remove it if you call them, but they purposely make it complex and miserable to try to figure out how to tell them to stop. That is why I'm recommending to you today's sponsor, Aura. Aura takes care of the hard part in these situations, automatically removing your info from these sites and keeping it off. And they keep you updated along the way about it. One of the best things is that Aura is not just like one form of digital protection, it's like a complete package. With Aura, you get alerts if your personal info is found on the dark web. You get real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking. You get 24/7 monitoring to help keep your identity secure. You get a secure VPN, antivirus, password manager, and more. Aura has US-based support available around the clock. If something does happen, if something goes wrong in the long run, Aura includes $5 million in identity theft insurance protection. And they have US fraud experts ready to help 24/7. It's one app with every layer of protection. I've been using Aura for a little bit now, and they just recently shared with me that they have removed my information from 31 different websites. That's awesome. And this includes a data breach for a website that I used to rent books from 15 years ago. That's incredible. You have nothing to lose with this offer, folks. Try Aura for free for 14 days at aura.com/pixelbro. In 2 weeks, you're going to see how your data is being exposed. I'm using it. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable. I'm getting updates constantly from it, and I say you shouldn't either. Thank you, Aura, for today's sponsorship. Gauntlet Legends. Released in the US in 1999 on the Nintendo 64, Gauntlet Legends brought Midway's arcade awesomeness to home consoles with a surprising amount of success. While its core is rooted in quarter munching, the N64 version carved out its own legacy, especially for gamers who grew up with friends crowded around a CRT, going on a quest to slay demons and dragons right from the comfort of your living room. And that is what we still want. That's why we got nostalgia. That's why I got the bongos still. This setup is as classic fantasy as it gets. Some heroes are summoned to defeat the escaped demon's scorn and recover the shattered shards of an ancient obelisk. In the beginning, you have access to the classes Warrior, Valkyrie, Wizard, and Archer. Once you hit 25 or so with the main characters, you can unlock secret characters. Now, I really don't want to spoil them here, as they're pretty neat, but a quick Google will tell you. There's no real narrative depth here. It's just the overarching narrative that gives you the purpose to get out there and start this dungeon crawling hack and slash power fantasy. Hey, and that's not a problem. That's basically what Gauntlet is. What makes this version stand out isn't the story, obviously. Though the footage I'm showing you here is single player, the best part of the game is co-op. I remember playing this years ago with some buddies crowded around the TV, and it was a blast then. Playing it now for footage simply reminded me of the excellent times to be had with multiple people. The N64's built-in 4-controller support turns Gauntlet Legends into one of the console's best multiplayer experiences. Seriously. Mowing down hordes of grunts is fun, but it's better with friends. I mean, that makes sense, right? Some of the best stuff is frantically racing to grab food or items before your friends. That stuff still cracks me up. I guess the spirit of the situation is kind of like your friend Kevin, who's eating all the candy in Secret of Mana. It's like, stop, Kevin. Regardless of what you're doing in Gauntlet, everything is better with 3 people yelling beside you. There's chaos, there's competition, cooperation, and a steady stream of laughter. It's addictive. With that note, the gameplay loop is simple, and almost hypnotically so. Enter a dungeon, kill everything, collect gold and keys, find the exit, and repeat. Each stage is packed with swarms of enemies, generators that constantly spawn more, and power-ups that give you a moment, just a moment of reprieve. It's old school design at its core, arcade-style action with RPG-like elements. You gain experience, increase stats, and unlock powerful special attacks. When you level up, you feel more powerful. Kill more junk, find more gold, do more levels. It's not deep, but it's satisfying, and it makes you feel like your character is getting some meaningful progression as you work your way towards scorn. Characters are distinct enough to offer replayability. The Warrior is a tank, the Valkyrie is balanced, the Wizard deals high magic damage, and the Archer is speedy but fragile. Eventually, you can unlock additional characters, as I said, and here's a hint. And each of these adds slight gameplay changes. That said, don't expect nuanced builds or loadouts. We're not talking Path of Exile, friends. This is a bowling pin, not a surgical knife. Visually, Gauntlet Legends pushes the N64 to its limits. Yeah, of course the 3D models might look rough by today's standards, but in what I played again this go around, the graphics look really solid and have that early 3D charm. The best part regarding this is how well the N64 handles it. When I was overwhelmed with monsters, I stopped for a moment and said, wow. Wow. The N64 has all this on screen at once, That's impressive. Really impressive. Environments are dark, moody, and a little blocky, but the game retains its arcade flair. Enemy designs are numerous, even if reused at times, and the boss battles, particularly this big dragon here, carry that high fantasy feeling. Some real excellence, though, is in the over-the-top voiceover. Hearing a deep, booming narrator declare, "Red Wizard is about to die. Don't shoot food." The soundtrack is suitably ominous and adventurous. It blends orchestral flourishes and dungeon-ready ambiance. It's not a highlight per se. I mean, you're not likely to be bumping Gauntlet Legacy in your dad van on the way to parent pickup. But it works in context and keeps the mood consistent. And yes, the constant narrator callouts can become repetitive, but they're part of the game's identity at this point, and it's funny. Green Warrior is about to die. Food! The game is a little repetitive. What you see is what you get. The Gauntlet Legends can feel grindy in long sessions. That's part of it. The environments, while varied at first glance, kind of blur together over time, and the enemy AI isn't exactly dynamic as they funnel into your death blender. Solo play, in particular, highlights the game's shallowness, unfortunately. It was made for groups, and it shows. But for what it is, a faithful arcade-to-console port with built-in 4-player mayhem, Gauntlet Legends is a blast. It's best enjoyed with friends, snacks, and an open embrace of its repetitive nature. If you've been holding on to 4 Nintendo 64 controllers for a while, or you've got enough controllers for your RetroPie, or whatever the case might be, this might be the one to break out with buddies. In a way, it's one of the last great couch co-op experiences of its kind, a relic of a bygone era where simplicity, chaos, and shared laughter left the arcade and fit snugly in your living room. Now, this next game is likely familiar to you if you knew the first. It's certainly harder than any other game on this list, but it's still a very enjoyable platformer with some RPG-like elements. I'm talking about Goemon's Great Adventure. Released in the US in 1999 by Konami, Goemon's Great Adventure, also known as the follow-up to Mystical Ninja, is a criminally underappreciated game in the N64's library. While its predecessor blended action, adventure, and RPG elements in a semi-open 3D world, this sequel pivots hard into the 2.5D side-scrolling platforming. And what a move that was. It retained a few of those RPG elements, which is what turned me onto it for this list, but it definitely focuses more on platforming and really leans into that. It's tighter, certainly tougher, and arguably more fun, even if it retains the same ridiculous energy and over-the-top storytelling as the previous games. You once again take control of Goemon and his band of eccentric heroes, Maru, Yae, and Sasuke, as they face off against the forces and influence of Dochuki, master of the underworld, who is threatening Japan. Resurrected monsters and the underworld lord? Red Wizard is ready to die. The story involves Maru's descendant using a tool of the old wise man to bring dead people back to life. Maru takes this and uses it to bring the dead back to life to please his lord. Because of this, we see a lot of ghosts, like in haunted locations, ghost machines, and undead armies, especially at night. It reads like a fever dream soaked in kabuki theater, but the absurdity works. It never takes itself too seriously, and that tone keeps the narrative from getting too bogged down, even when things take a darker turn than you might expect for a game as tongue-in-cheek as this is. Gameplay-wise, Goemon's Great Adventure is more a platformer than anything else. Again, it has some RPG stuff going on, but holy moly, it's definitely basically a platformer. Some good news is it's a return to 2D roots, with side-scrolling levels rendered in full 3D environments, essentially, again, a 2.5D design. And this works really well. Controls are snappy, responsive, and precise, but it's much harder than the first N64 title's more forgivable nature. Each of the 4 characters has their own strengths. Goemon's a good all-rounder with a chain whip. Maru has a weird but useful paddle attack. Yae's katana and water-based abilities come in handy, and Sasuke has speed and projectiles. The level design is stellar. Each stage offers a mix of tight platforming, environmental puzzles, secret areas, and just enough enemy variety to keep things fresh. Boss fights are grand and creative, usually preceded by elaborate cutscenes dripping with that distinct Goemon humor. And yes, giant robot battles return, complete with absurd anime intros and missile-spamming madness. They're still as wild as ever. What more could you ask for? One of the standout features in the game is local 2-player co-op. Yeah, you and a friend can take on the adventure together. I hear it's chaotic and hilarious. Of course I played it single player. I also hear that co-op adds replayability and helps smooth out some of the difficulty spikes, especially later in the game where enemy placement and platforming becomes downright brutal. 2 heads are better than 1. Visually, Goemon's Great Adventure is bold and vibrant. Its blocky, colorful characters and colorful environments blend traditional Japanese aesthetics with zany, futuristic tech. The visual contrast of haunted graveyards and candy-colored castles is captivating. The soundtrack, like the first games, is an absolute banger. Traditional Japanese instruments are blended with rock, funk and synth to create something totally unique. It's catchy, eccentric, and completely unforgettable, just like the game itself. And again, I find myself here scripting and humming the music even though I played the game a few days ago. The one real caveat that everyone seems to know, and I have to agree with, is that Goemon's adventure is hard. Not just retro game hard, it's legitimately blisteringly difficult at times. The kind of hard where you'll curse a mistimed jump or a surprise enemy spawn. It's rarely unfair though, and the difficulty curve, while steep, is one that is conquered with practice and patience. Goemon's great adventure is not terribly eat up with aspects to make it very RPG-esque, to be fair. It's almost like Mystical Ninja's aspects, but even more toned down. There's quests, yeah, armor, usable items, coin collection from vendors, but it's mostly just one of the best platformers on the N64. It's weird, it's wonderful, and it's wildly challenging, but it's also a must-play for anyone who appreciates cult classics with personality and polish. Again, while the RPG aspects are very light, it's still worth giving it a go if you appreciate the stuff beyond the platforming, like town exploration and quest progression. I personally like the first game more, but if Mystical Ninja starring Goemon was the opening act, this is the full show. Now, despite being mostly platformer, I think Goemon's Great Adventure might have more RPG elements to it than this next game. The next game was suggested to me as an RPG for the N64, and it does have some elements to that. I can see why, but it's probably going to surprise you as much as it did me. I'm talking about Hexen for the Nintendo 64. Released on the Nintendo 64 in 1997, Hexen was a port of the 1995 PC classic Hexen Beyond Heretic, a dark fantasy first-person shooter that blended the first-paced combat of Doom with the more maze structure, class-based mechanics, and a setting that feels ripped right out of medieval nightmares. While Hexen 64 is far from perfect, it's one of the most atmospheric and challenging experiences on the console, especially for you folks that like gothic horror and cryptic design. Set in the world of Chronos, Hexen players become one of the three warriors known as the Three Heroes: Baratus the Fighter, Daedalon the Mage, and Parius the Cleric, each offering a distinct playstyle. The Fighter thrives in up-close brutality, the Mage keeps his distance with magical projectiles, and the Cleric strikes a balance between the two, wielding both magic and magic with a beating stick. This class system isn't just a gimmick, it changes how you approach combat, exploration, and survival in this dark, dreary, and deadly world. Yeah, Hexen looks a lot like Doom, but the RPG light stuff is sort of what sets Hexen apart from its siblings. Instead of straightforward level progression, the game adopts a hub and spoke design. It almost feels like you're questing as you're working around the labyrinth, feeling similar to, dungeon crawling. You'll return to central locations, unlock shortcuts, and backtrack through previously explored area as you find keys, flip switches, and solve environmental puzzles, which feels slightly similar to RPGs. It's more Metroidvania than arcade shooter, as it rewards careful observation and memory. The character classes are certainly something right out of D&D fantasy, and this, of course, lends to the RPG feel somewhat. I had a viewer recommend this game as an RPG for the N64, and indeed, this setup was ambitious for its time, but when you get down to it, it's mostly just Doom with a little RPG flair, a little fantasy flair there. But you know what? There's still so much to love here that's RPG adjacent, so don't let it deter you too much. The combat is brutal and weighty. Enemies are numerous and relentless. The fighter cleaves through them with bone-crunching ferocity, and the mage peppers foes with magical attacks from a distance, but that can feel a bit underpowered at times, to be fair. The cleric, meanwhile, is the most technical, often relying on spacing and precision. No matter the class, success comes through movement, timing, and resource conservation. Health and mana or weapon ammo are scarce, and enemies hit hard. This isn't a run-and-gun experience, it's a slugfest in stone halls soaked in blood that require a little more precision and care than you might have expected. Visually, Hexen 64 looks just like Doom. Big surprise there, right? But it's pretty solid looking anyway. Sure, the textures can seem a little muddy and the lighting less dynamic, with very few but apparent frame rate drops, but the atmosphere still shines through. Stone cathedrals, decaying swamps, and dark libraries are soaked in dread. The music, an eerie blend of chants, moans, and ambient horror, adds to the oppressive vibe. It's not pretty, but it's powerful. One of the major criticisms of the N64 version is its control scheme, but it's what you should expect. While functional, the lack of a second analog stick means aiming and strafing can feel clunky, especially when compared to modern standards or even its PC counterpart. But again, this was the normal setup back then. But after you've played modern games, it's difficult, in my opinion, to get used to this setup again immediately, just like GoldenEye 64 or Turok or any other FPS of the day. Even with the complaints and it not quite being an RPG as one might anticipate, fate. It was less than I expected. Hexon 64 holds a special place for those who are willing to brave its cryptic labyrinths. It's a punishing, brain-twisting, and atmospherically rich experience that demands patience and persistence. It's not an easy recommendation for everyone, nor does it fit too comfortably under the label of RPG, in my opinion, but for those drawn to the darker corners of fantasy gaming, it's often compelling. Hexen's not like really up my alley by any means. It's not my kind of gameplay anymore. Like, I like FPSs, don't get me wrong, but they're kind of low on my priority list at this point. The fantasy elements of it like drew me in, but that was really about it. This next game, however, has so many things I love in just one little package. It blew my socks off when I finally sat down to play it. I'm talking about Mega Man 64. Released in the US in 2001, Mega Man 64 brought the legendary Blue Bomber into the third dimension for Nintendo fans, and for the Nintendo 64, this was a mighty impressive feat. It's a direct port of Mega Man Legends for the PlayStation 1. Mega Man 64 is a reimagining of the classic Mega Man formula, trading side-scrolling excellence and tight platforming for a more open-world approach, with lots of exploration to be had. This game features some light RPG mechanics and a fully polygonal world. Actually, I'd argue that it might even be the most RPG-like game on this list so far. For better or for worse, or for just a quick detour. Mega Man 64 is one of the boldest moves in the franchise's history. It's lovely. Set in a post-apocalyptic world flooded by water, Mega Man 64 stars Mega Man, a digger who explores ancient ruins in search of refractor energy sources. The equipment you get along the way and the customization that comes along with the gear gives it a little more RPG flair. This isn't to mention the questing, exploration, and open sense of adventure. Alongside his companions Roll and Data, his adorable Robo-Monkey save station, who's just so cute. Mega Man stumbles upon a buried mystery involving ancient technology, some little monster robots called Reaverbots, and the fan-favorite antagonist known as the Bonds, a family of lovable, sky pirate misfits who steal every scene that they're in. The story has heart and humor. It's a bit more anime than what longtime fans might expect, but it's also undeniably charming. Gameplay shifts away from the choice of linear, level-based design of the original series. Instead, Mega Man 64 features interconnected environments, dungeon crawling, and gear upgrades that enhance your ability. You'll earn Zenny, the game's currency, explore towns, complete side quests, and talk to NPCs. It's not quite an open world by today's standards in video games, but for 2000, it sure felt like it. Combat is a blend of lock-on shooting and light platforming. Mega Man's trusty Buster Arm can be upgraded with various parts to modify its power, range, and rate of fire. Again, this is RPG-esque regarding the gear. Special weapons like grenades, machine guns, and drills can also be equipped, but only one at a time, adding some light strategy to the mix. Unfortunately, the game's biggest hurdle is the control scheme. The N64's single analog stick and stiff camera controls make aiming and movement feel a little clunky, especially during fast-paced fights or tight platforming segments. It's just an unfortunate standard of the day. Of course, it's playable, even incredibly enjoyable, if you're in the right mindset and willing to forgive. But if you're not a fan of 3D retro games, this might not make you one either. I mean, it is what it is, and if you like what it is good. Visually, Mega Man 64 is simply outstanding in my opinion. The 3D textures are beautiful, and I love the expressive faces of the characters. I mean, bravo on these. Compared to the PlayStation version, it's a bit cleaner in places, but more prone to muddy textures and frame drops. But it also has so much voice acting. If you know how bad audio compression had to be for the Nintendo 64, these lines will absolutely surprise you. Character models are simplistic but stylized, and the game's bright, bold color palette helps offset its technical shortcomings. The voice acting, fully intact from the PlayStation original, is a lot of fun, even if it can be a little cheesy at times. Still though, there comes in the story several unexpectedly heartfelt moments between the characters. The sound is great, of course. The music ranges from peppy town themes to deep dungeon tracks, and the effects, while basic, still evoke that satisfying Mega Man feel. It's clear Capcom wanted this game to stand apart tonally from the mainline entries while keeping enough DNA intact to feel familiar. And that includes great music. Mega Man 64 is a fascinating experiment, for sure, as it brought Mega Man into the 3D age with purpose and imagination. For fans of the franchise, or anyone curious about early 3D action-adventure games and how impressive the N64 cart can be, it's definitely worth a try. Maybe you're looking to slow it down a little bit. Maybe yoink the action and combat out of a game, and maybe just try like playing the role. If that's the case, I have the perfect RPG-ish game for you. I'm talking about one of the most popular in the entire franchise, Harvest Moon 64. Released in 1999, Harvest Moon 64 was another entry in the franchise coming off the back of the Super Nintendo and follow-up Game Boy games. It's a comfy farm life simulator on a console known for multiplayer party experiences and flair. While the Nintendo 64 lineup dazzled with stars like Mario, Link, and Donkey Kong, Harvest Moon 64 took a much calmer approach. No world saving, no bosses, just you, a patch of land, a bunch of seeds, and the passage of time. After all, it is no bad thing to celebrate a simple life. You play as a young man who inherits his grandfather's dilapidated farm in Flowerbud Village, with little more than an old hoe. You can't say that again, a giggle. Forgive me. I wish I were more mature, but I'm not. With little more than an old hammer and an empty wallet, you set out to restore the land, grow crops, raise animals, and build relationships with the villagers. The premise sounds modest, but it's exactly this simplicity and the depth hidden within it that makes Harvest Moon 64 so endearing even today and a fan favorite for the series. As an RPG, you are literally living the life of this young man and making choices constantly. They may not be combat or swords and sorcery, but this game nails the progression aspects of RPGs as you make choices of spouse, how to handle each day, and who you are in this cute little farm. Again, it's not a number cruncher, but it's hard to deny the role-playing aspect of this game. The core loop is deceptively engrossing. You wake up each morning, water your crops, feed your animals, clear rocks and weeds, and head into town to socialize or shop, if you don't pass out from exhaustion. It really just doesn't seem that different from middle-aged life for me. And if you switch the animals to children and clearing rocks to work, I guess, then yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. Seasons pass, each bringing their own crops, festivals, and rhythms. Rainy days let you skip watering. Storms can destroy your hard work, unfortunately, but that's the name of the game. The game is constantly nudging you toward planning ahead and adapting, without ever feeling really punishing. Harvest Moon 64 is just a farming sim, but at the same time it's more than just a farming sim. Every villager has a schedule, a personality, and a subtle arc. You can court one of the 5 bachelorettes, each of them with their own backstory, family situation, and unique charm. Or if you got that dog in you, you can court all 5 of them and just settle for one of them in the end. These games kind of bring out the worst of me. Forget Grand Theft Auto, forget the strippers and that sort of stuff. On Harvest Moon, I'm making my way around town.
Hey, hot lady, what's going on?
Now will it be the lucky librarian Maria or the shy tomboyish Anne? Unlike many titles of its era, Harvest Moon 64 doesn't just track your progress. It asks, what kind of life are you building?
I'm a hound dog.
Mechanically, the game can be a bit discreet. There are no tutorials really, and much of the system, like affection levels or animal health, is hidden behind trial and error. Inventory space is limited. There's no calendar on screen. Saving is only possible before bed. But for many, these quirks add to the game's charm. You don't master Harvest Moon 64 through power leveling. You live in it, and you appreciate the method in that timing. Visually, the game's very humble, but it's also effective. The character sprites are pre-rendered and colorful. The world is cozy, despite its low-resolution textures. The music loops gently in the background, catchy and soothing like a lullaby from an era before life got too loud. And loop it does. There's a warmth to the whole presentation that's hard to explain and even harder to replicate. Even today, Harvest Moon 64 holds a special place for fans. While newer farming sims like Stardew Valley have iterated and refined the formula, Harvest Moon 64 remains the emotional blueprint and one of the best received games of the series. It captures something rare, the joy of building something with your own hands, day by day, in a world that rewards patience and kindness over spectacle. It's not perfect, but it never needed to be. It's about appreciating the blooming flowers and realizing that you planted every one of those seeds. Now, the next game is getting a mention because I figure someone will bring it up. I did play it for a little bit on stream, but this game is basically just RPG combat, but with the charm and beauty of the very familiar IP. If you love the IP, you'll love the game. We're talking about Pokemon Stadium. Released in the US in 2000, Pokemon Stadium brought the Game Boy Pokemon games into full 3D for the first time, letting trainers see their favorite creatures come to life in vibrant arena-style battles. And that's the major appeal of it. While they lacked a traditional adventure mode, which robs it a bit of the role-playing element, Stadium's focus on turn-based combat battles and tournament-style progression gave players a new lens through which to experience Pokemon. Part of the magic came through the transfer pack. Plug in your red, blue, or yellow cartridge, and suddenly your own team was battling on the big screen. Every nickname, level, and stat was intact. Did you name your Pikachu, bitch? This personalized experience made the game feel alive in a way few console adaptations could. Many games like Clefairy Sings and Ekans Hoop Hurl added some party game charm, making it a hit with friends, but the real meat was battling with Pokemon. Sure, the rental Pokemon had rough stats, and the lack of an overworld disappointed some, but Stadium wasn't trying to be a mainline RPG. It was more of a celebration, a highlight of battles, collecting, and the bond players formed with their teams. Stadium didn't have the journey, really, but it had the fight. And for a generation of fans, the first 3D roar of Charizard was something to celebrate. The last couple of games really need no introduction, but they deserve all the fanfare that they get. It's an age-old argument, not a hill that I'm willing to die on by any means. Are these games RPGs or not? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, of course, but it really doesn't matter to me what we label them as long as we label them as excellent video games. The first game I'm talking about is The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. If Ocarina of Time was a grand heroic epic, Majora's Mask is its strange, sorrowful, and deeply personal shadow. That's probably a fair way of putting it. Released in 2000, just 2 years after its predecessor, Majora's Mask took a wildly different approach. It keeps the gameplay engine and character models of Ocarina, but twists them into a darker, more introspective tale, a psychological warfare sort of Zelda. It's arguably the most experimental and haunting entry in the Zelda series, and one that has only grown more revered and respected with time as we continue as fans to clamor for more darker Zelda games like this. Set in the doomed land of Termina, Link finds himself reliving the same 3 days over and over again, under the looming threat of this jacked up, grinning moon that's about to crash into the world. Even from the beginning, it's clearly different. There's a constant sense of melancholy, of time slipping away, of people facing inevitable loss. The game's central mechanic, a repeating 72-hour cycle, forces the player to think differently. You're not saving the world in a linear fashion like the other Zelda games. You're living in its final moments, learning its routines, unraveling its secrets, and doing what you can to help people, even if your deeds are ultimately undone when time resets. It's abysmal, but in an amazing way. This time loop mechanic is the beating heart of Majora's Mask. Each day in Termina unfolds like a living stage play, with characters following specific routines. You'll see a postman making his rounds, a couple preparing for a wedding, and a child saying goodbye to a parent, all with incredible detail. The gameplay and story, heck, the role-playing, comes in how your actions or inactions affect these routines. You can't do everything in one cycle. You will fail. But you do it again, armed with more knowledge and more items, and a little further understanding of the inevitability in the end. Mechanically, the game focuses on the mask system. Link can wear various magical masks that grant him powers, many of which are tied to deep side quests. The Deku, Goron, and Zora mask transform Link into entirely new forms with different abilities and movement styles. These aren't just gimmicks. They're completely realized characters with their own stories and embody the game's themes of identity, transformation, and grief. It's an amazing game. I get giddy thinking about how good this game is all the time. Anyway, while Termina's world is smaller than Hyrule, it's densely packed with detail, side quest, and meaning. The game encourages exploration not just of space, but of time. You're constantly experimenting. What happens if I'm here on the second day instead of the first? What if I save this person before they disappear? What if I'm here at night instead of day? It's a puzzle box of overlapping stories that rewards observation and empathy as much as swordplay. And that's where the role-playing comes in. It's definitely packed with story. It's definitely packed with combat and abilities. The distinction so many people make so often is the lack of character leveling progression, but realistically, can't we call that the heart? Maybe. It's awfully dense story-wise for a game that isn't an RPG, as some would have you to believe. I've read and I've heard compelling arguments from both sides, each making great points. So where do I land on it? Honestly, I'm not really sure. I guess I'm still in the camp of it doesn't matter. Shame on me for trying to be like, I'm taking the high road, but really, it doesn't matter. Visually, Majora's Mask is moodier than Ocarina.
Because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you.
The color palette is darker, the characters are eerie, and the environments are uncanny. The soundtrack, one of the most unsettling in the series, uses minor keys and offbeat rhythms to amplify the tension of a world on the brink, and it is awesome. The usual issue people have with this game is the cycle and time limit, but it's not as nerve-wracking as one might think. You are given the ability to slow down time considerably, and that makes it a lot more manageable, a little more palatable. Another is the difficulty curve. It's more difficult than its predecessor for sure, but it's incredibly rewarding. It is incredibly rewarding. The game isn't just about saving the world. It's about saving moments, fleeting, fragile moments, in the lives of people who may never remember you. It's about planting seeds in a garden that you may never get to see sort of stuff. And that, more than anything, is what makes Majora's Mask unforgettable. RPG or not. You know that if we talk about Majora's Mask, then we also have to talk about the head honcho, the main Mac Daddy, Ocarina of Time. I know you've heard it. I know you're familiar with it. What can I possibly even say that can make a difference in your opinion of this game? Probably very little. But I do want you to consider this a challenge. Try not to nostalgia, or even try not to immediately want to play this game or play it again. When The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time released in 1998, it didn't just redefine the franchise. It redefined what video games could be. No hyperbole here. Often cited as one of the greatest games of all time, it was Nintendo's first foray into bringing Hyrule into a fully 3D world. The result was a genre-defining masterpiece that remains influential, magical, and remarkably playable and fun decades later. Ocarina of Time is a coming-of-age story of Link, a young boy from the Kokiri Forest, chosen by destiny to thwart the rise of the evil sorcerer Ganondorf. The plot unfolds over 2 timelines, childhood and adulthood. This adds a sense of progression that makes the game feel absolutely huge in both scope and theme. It's a story of innocence lost, of time slipping through your fingers, and of courage maturing in the face of darkness. The transition to 3D could have easily been ruinous for Zelda, but Nintendo approached it with groundbreaking elegance. Lock-on targeting, then called Z-targeting, transformed action into 3D space, making combat fluid and precise, which was rare at the time for 3D video games. Dungeons, always a Zelda hallmark, became intricate 3-dimensional puzzles, really captivating on the 3D aspect. Each dungeon was absolutely a masterclass in design. From the eerie forest temple to the bastard son of 1,000 maniacs, the water temple, every dungeon demanded reflection on top of reflex, and offered players a balance of combat, puzzle solving, and exploration that is nearly perfect. Hyrule Field itself, for all its now minimalist geometry, was jaw-dropping in 1998. A seamless overworld that connected towns, lakes, mountains, and deserts made the game feel like a living, breathing place, like an open world, a Breath of the Wild before Breath of the Wild. Of course, you can't talk about Ocarina of Time without talking about, hey, the ocarina, right? It is a literal instrument of time, storms, and magic. The ability to play songs with button combinations wasn't just a delightful addition, it was an important part of both the gameplay and the emotional resonance in the game. Songs could summon your horse, alter the time of day, change the weather, or warp you across the world. It made the player feel like they weren't just controlling Link, they were becoming part of his legend. And memorizing the tunes along the way as you inevitably use them over and over sealed this game in the minds of millions for decades to come, shaping an entire generation. I mean, how many gamers don't recognize the Song of Storms or Zelda's Lullaby? Come on. The visuals, though blocky by today's standards, were cutting edge at the time. The lighting, use of color, and atmospheric effects like the glow of fairies or the thunderclouds over Ganon's castle imbued the world with a mythic tone. Combined with Koji Kondo's unforgettable score, an emotional roller coaster of sweeping orchestral themes, melancholic village tunes, and haunting dungeon music, the game's presentation was nothing short of epic. One of the most impressive aspects of Ocarina of Time is how well it marries structure with freedom. The game guides you without hand-holding, encourages curiosity without overwhelming you. It respects the player's intelligence, and through its time-jumping mechanic, it creates a sense of legacy. Your choices as young Link ripple forward into the future. Few games achieve that kind of narrative resonance in tandem with mechanical excellence, even today. The wild thing for me with this game is when I was playing it again for footage. It has been years since I played this game, though I've played through it several times at this point in my life. I thought I already knew what I wanted to say about the game, but when I got back into it, I had trouble putting it down, of course. Looking at the game, not just as a game, but as design choices, and understanding what went into creating this masterpiece. Reflecting on how much gaming has changed, or not changed, over the last 25 years while playing this made me realize just how special it is, even today. If there's smoke, there's likely a fire, and there's a reason so many consider this one of the greatest games of all time and revere it all these years later. Ocarina of Time certainly has story. It has character progression, action combat, quests, fantasy elements, equipment upgrades, and many other aspects that others note regarding role-playing games. So, is it an RPG? The real question one might ask is, why does it matter? It's excellent. And if you enjoy whatever features you might attribute to the label RPG, you're likely to fall in love with this game, or fall in love with it all over again. If you haven't played it, that's amazing. You have ahead of yourself one of the most endearing and incredible pieces of gaming that has ever been constructed. If you have played it, you know.